It's not about just reading the data. It's about feeling where your customer is right now and what their life is really like. Hello, everyone. It's Lisa Nirell of Energized Growth. And boy, I can't wait to introduce you today to our power panel. If you're looking for ways to break the speed limit of how you deliver value to your audience, whether they are prospects, they are customers, lifelong customers, we're going to have two great guests today to show us what they're doing to break the speed limit and work with companies to address this challenge. You know, you can thank companies like Amazon for training customers to expect things quickly, but how do you know what to deliver at the right time through the right channel? This is not easy. So Michael Taylor and Amy Shioji will be joining us soon and telling us some of the strategies. So today, I'm also going to be sharing some examples with you from companies we got to interview and study over the last 3 months. So let's start first with a company most of you will recognize, Ford Motor Company. Now, their Ford F-150 truck market is a $42 billion nut for them. So do they focus on it pretty closely? You bet. And they just launched and announced, I should say, their Ford F-150 Lightning, which is their brand new all-electric truck. Now, having watched the show on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow, who outlined all of the new features of this truck, it is mind-blowing. It has a built-in generator. It is shifted from being made of steel to aluminum. It is sexy. It goes on over 700 miles without an extra charge. I mean, the list goes on. Now, I'm not here working for Ford. They did not pay me to show you this video, but the point I'm making is they listened to their customers and then they went an extra step beyond and found things that their customers never dreamed of and built it into this new truck. Now, that's what I call delivering value quickly. The other part of this that you don't see is how long it took General Motors CEO Mary Barra to respond to this competitive threat. I waited, I watched. It took her more than 3 weeks to come out on CNBC and announce, we are investing 30% more into our electric vehicle budget and R&D going forward. So if it's taking you 3 weeks to respond to your competition, my friends, it might just be too late. And that's why I want to welcome my partner in crime and co-conspirator on delivering value quickly to customers, Michael Taylor of Simple Mind. Hey, good morning, Michael. Where does this find you today?
Well, it finds me at a client's office in Reno. So here I am. Yeah.
Well, it's great to see you. You're in Reno, Nevada in the United States. I want to tell everyone too, we had, thanks to the wonders of LinkedIn Learning, we have people who have registered from Ghana, San Francisco, California, New York City, Colombia, Toronto, Egypt, Kenya, Saudi Arabia, and Mumbai. So I want to remind everyone, if you are watching now, tell us where you're from and let us know who you are, because we will be taking your live questions. Michael, let's hear your perspective on this. You work with a lot of professional services firms and business-to-business organizations who might look at that Ford announcement and go, hey, that really doesn't apply to me. I'm not a manufacturing company. I don't have to worry about delivering value quickly. What's your take on that?
Well, I think we're all being trained to receive value in our exacting terms way faster and better. And I think that's bleeding into every segment, whether you're professional services or a product. If you'll notice, there's this convergence of experience that's starting to come in as an expectation, where We want everything, every touch point with any company that we pay money to interact with, to be highly relevant, to be actually to make it feel like I know you. I know you. It feels familiar. You're familiar with me. And, I think in the case of Ford, I think that they know their customers so well, they could create things that their customers would never dream to ask for. So to me, that's sort of another level. That's just what Jedi level, hyper personalization, which is to say we understand this audience. We built this very successful truck. Now let's see if we can add to it, right? Let's make the truck a power generator. If your house goes down, if you're in Texas and your house goes down, you can plug your house in. So yeah, it's about just creating those personal journeys and having zero irrelevant touch points or communications, right?
Yes. And if we look at some of the research, and then I want to bring Amy on in just a moment, but if you look at the Forrester Research that was just conducted with 932 C-suite executives that are in the B2B space, they asked them, well, how many different buyer interactions are you seeing now? How many times do buyers interact with you before you get to close business? And they said it went from 17 touch points to 27 during the pandemic. So if you're not constantly thinking, how can I deliver value all along that path, then you're missing out, and you might be General Motors. But Michael, without further ado, what do you say we introduce one of the finest customer experience experts on the planet, a friend, former head of CX at USA Today, and now head of CX and strategy at Strategic Education. Amy Shioji, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Well, welcome. Yeah, we're just kind of throwing you in here after talking about trucks. We're talking about trucks, but maybe we can transition to talking about students, because we have students of knowledge with us today from Wisconsin, India, Nigeria. We have Kelly from Washington, D.C. And speaking, Michael, of trucks, we have someone here from Texas. So let's just dive in for this discussion here, Amy. You've learned a lot about delivering value quickly in the publishing world and now in the education world. What are you seeing now as we emerge from the pandemic about what customers expect?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. So, I think to your point, we often talk a lot about customer value, but in the context of acquisition. And I think true value for the customer is really realized not at the point of purchase, right? So, for us at Strategic Education, we look at things like customer value as defined by customer outcomes. So in our case, it's things like, do our students, graduate with degrees and find gainful employment? But in order to do that, we really need to understand, and all companies really need to understand, the drivers of retention, and specifically, very often how you influence first year retention, which is, typically a leading indicator of how loyal your customers are going to be over time. And so I think it's just, to all the conversation that you've started to have here, I think there really needs to be a strong marriage between marketing across CX product, all the different functions in an organization. CX is not the responsibility of one particular function. It really is a discipline that all of the organization needs to be aligned around. And I think when we think about customer value, either in terms of acquisition or ultimately in terms of retention and loyalty, you'd have to think about what are the dimensions in which we really want to measure that. And that's right. And what are the things that break that down? And to me, that's often misaligned goals, processes, prioritization that is not aligned in terms of how these groups actually deliver value consistently. And that's the real challenge, I think, at hand for many organizations these days. Well,
I think that's a great place to jump off and talk further. you've had to align lots of different audiences, not only in your deep experience in the publishing business, but also now in the online education business. I'd like to hear from both of you on this question, which is, when do you start getting concerned about alignment, and how do you rapidly build that internal alignment so people understand the need for rapid value delivery? So let's see if Amy, who wants to dive in?
I'll let Michael go first since I just went, and then I'll.
Well, I think that I think it's very good to have an assessment of everybody who has touch points with the external, with your customers, and bring them together into a process where they can all make decisions together, where they're aligned on priorities. I think you have to start first by aligning priorities, find the wins between internal groups, and have a system and a published process for making those decisions so you can manage your touch points from the very beginning.
Yes, so that's a good point, because Michael, you and I have been working with a $1 billion plus organization around this very same challenge, which is applying the same decision-making style for every decision, especially ones involving customers or prospective customers, is difficult and not a great idea for a couple of reasons, right? One is you don't want your competition to be able to predict your every move. Number one.
Right.
And number two, sometimes consensus building is not the best decision-making option.
Yeah,
right?
I think especially with larger firms, I mean, it gets very hard. And I would say part of the system that's critical, especially for these billion-dollar companies, is the ability to have a system to make decisions very quickly, because the larger the organization, it seems like the longer it takes to make decisions. And if you don't have some kind of agile process, some kind of SWAT team that can come together and make decisions, I often see big companies lose the initiative as they're trying to perfect some strategy. By the time they roll it out, it's already almost irrelevant. I mean, and it's kind of sad. So I think that's a big learning for any large company, of how do we make decisions very quickly, dynamically, agilely? How do we test things? Not easy. It's a transformation process for sure.
Yeah.
And how about you, Amy?
Well, I would just lean on that. One of the things I think that's been really opportunistic at my own company, and as you mentioned, so I lead both corporate strategy and customer experience. And I actually think it's a really, really great vantage point, because given that CX really needs to have a real end-to-end sort of customer lifecycle view and work across all of the different functional areas, aligned with something like corporate strategy, it's really important. And what we spend a lot of time on is how do we upfront really align in terms of our goal setting frameworks, in terms of aligning our executive teams. How do we make sure that there's sort of shared accountability and understanding in our goals, in our priorities, and make sure that that cascades down throughout the organization? That's probably one of the bigger things in terms of how stuck things get, is we've prioritized it, but other organizations have a different, or other silos have a different set of priorities or ways in which they are prioritizing key initiatives. And I think those are some of the really key pieces that have to be considered. And I think, to Michael's point too, scope creep always happens with projects, right, or key initiatives. And I think, one of the things that we try to be very deliberate about is saying, what is the key business problem that we're trying to solve? What does success for that look like? What does good enough look like? And what are we not going to address with this particular sprint or phase or project or initiative? And while that sounds fairly basic, it is really important, and it often doesn't happen frequently enough. And then you start to get, well, we have to add this dimension, or this stakeholder needs to be involved, or this type of thing has to happen. But I think if you have the scaffolding to say, we know directionally we're all aligned in terms of our overall corporate strategy, our goals, the key things of measures of success that we want to aim for, and then we're really deliberate in our tactical execution in terms of what we're focused on and what we're not focused on. Those are the things that I think help really create more organizational agility.
And I want to pause for a moment. I always look for these mic drop moments, and I love the 4 questions that you're asking here, Amy. And I want to encourage everyone who's watching this to rewind this replay when you go back to your LinkedIn or your Facebook or YouTube page. This is really powerful. You asked a question about what we will not include or what we will not do. And Michael, you remember some of the clients we've worked with that are very afraid to ask that question. Their natural tendency is to say, what additional things do we want to pile on? And then their team's heads explode.
Yeah, I think both of you are sort of directing at something I think very important, is to push to the simplest form of action you can, right? So Amy, if you're saying, what do we not do? Because what happens is, this, especially with really smart people, highly educated people, is there's this complexity that just starts flooding in every time you analyze, well, can we add this? Is there something else we can do? And so there's not a simple framework to operate in. And what we often do is we'll create a placemat, and we'll say, here's our principles, here's how we're operating. And if you can't put it on one page and easy enough to internalize, it's too complex, right? If you have to refer to a series of documents and decisions, it just bottlenecks. The more complex it gets, the less likely it is to move fast. So eliminating, actually talking about and saying, what do we need to have and what do we not need to have? What can we take out of this so we can move faster? I think is a big question. It's a huge one.
Mm-hmm. And I think along with that, the other, one of the other questions is, what do we need to see to believe? I think there's also this sort of analysis paralysis of, we need all of these things to be absolutely perfect. And speed to value often says, we need to directionally know that these are the key things stated up front about what success looks like and what some of those milestones ultimately need to be. But we need to be able to say, data's not always going to be perfect. We're going to need to directionally make some decisions. Are we aligned on who makes those decisions? And can we get some guardrails around what success of this really looks like at key phases of this journey? Because that's another area where you get into this trap of, just all of the data and all the things that can possibly happen, and when you're going to see maturity in some of these results and things like that. And that discipline is really important, but you have to balance that.
I see that as well. It's like, it's about success, not perfection. And yes, Kelly, we are all in agreement with you. And it's great to have you here today, Kelly. I think we also have a question from Atlanta, Georgia, coming in from another person focused on delivering value quickly, the CMO of Park Mobile and head of product, Jeff Perkins.
Hi, my name is Jeff Perkins. I'm the CMO of Park Mobile. My question for the panel is, a lot of marketing organizations are built around bigger projects, longer timelines, processes usually take extensive amounts of time to deliver advertising, brand campaigns, install new marketing automation tools. And so I guess the question for this panel, based on the topic, is how do you reimagine your marketing org to be able to deliver faster than you're delivering today? So how are you able to look at your people and your processes, and what do you do to really make that org work at a higher velocity? Thanks for your time.
Michael, I'm going to pass that over to you to start.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm thinking about early part of my career where I had one leg in technology, which is doing these massive websites, and there was always this heavy technology component. And I think we have a great model. I mean, if you look at technology companies that are successful, what do? They know how to agilely deliver value. They know how to define what's good enough, right? They have a definition for that. They know how to test very quickly. They know how to make quick decisions. So I think if you want to look at a great model, sort of an area, a group of people who had to solve this a long time ago because they kept failing. They were taking too long to update applications and to send things to market. I would look at the technology, specifically software and successful application companies who use agile processes. And those processes are not, they could be used for anything, especially anything that's complex. So I think marketing is due to totally adopt agile technology. And so, yeah, I would use that as a guide to speed everything up and to move at the pace that our customers are now expecting.
And I will layer on that another item to consider as you're building teams or maybe redesigning your teams, returning from working from home. A lot of you out there are probably designing new ways of working, hybrid models. Some people are going to stay at home a certain number of times during the week, et cetera. And what I would say is this is going to put some new strains and pressures on how you interact with people and who you work with. You might need to look at how do you rebuild trust. And one of the things, Michael, that I remember working on with you with another client was there was so much fear in that organization. This was a West Coast company, and there was just so much worry that someone was going to make a mistake, that they didn't speak up and they wouldn't make a decision without the senior executive giving them a blessing every step of the way. So the psychological safety that Professor Amy Edmondson talks about at Harvard is more important now than any methodology, planning tool, spreadsheet, or key performance indicators. If you can't get through that initial gate, it makes it much tougher to achieve some of the good things that our clients and Amy that you have also achieved. So, Jeff, we want to thank you at Park Mobile for that great question. And I want to remind people that we're also taking your live questions, so feel free to post them. Amy, what are your thoughts now that you've been at Strategic Education for over a year, I believe? What are some things you've learned about the students through your agile approaches and your hyper focus on gathering, on using data to make good decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I mentioned that, we really try to be intentional about focusing on customer outcomes and specifically looking at the drivers of student retention for us. And I think that led us down the path, not unlike many marketers and companies, at looking at sort of customer onboarding. In our case, new student retention. And, I think for us, it was the basic things such as, do our students know where to go, what's expected of them? Think of this as sort of your more usual onboarding wizard that highlights sort of product features and benefits. But also really important to us was how do we help to sort of mentally and motivationally prepare students? So think of it as, how do we meet our customers where they are? Because for us, in most cases, we cater to adult learners, people who maybe haven't been back to school in a very, very long time, or in some cases, maybe first generation learners. And what we found was that while we can give them a basic orientation of how to navigate our digital campuses or where their course syllabus was and how to use certain platform features, some of the bigger hurdles that we had, and we did ethnography studies, we did a lot to really understand where our students and our customers really are with us on this journey, was we found that, some of the things they hadn't anticipated was I haven't even set up an actual workspace in my home. I haven't had conversations with my spouse or my partner about what going back to school means in terms of, job responsibilities at home, things like that. And those are actually some of the things that stand as some of the biggest hurdles for our adult students. And while we tended to sort of we used to say, well, those things happen outside of the classroom. We can't influence those things. I think we've really challenged that to say there are things that we can do. We can help guide conversation and get people ready to be more prepared. So we have found that by having, much more focus, not just on the brass tacks of here's the things you need to do to use our product better, but to say, where are you in this and how can we help sort of bring you along has been really, really influential in terms of people feeling more prepared, being able to tackle their assignments, much more head on and not have the stress of some of the things that are happening in their personal lives weigh in on, their academic success and pursuits. And I think that's, been one of the, most not only impactful things for students, but also has been a real win in the organization to say we need to sort of break this idea that we can only influence our own touch points or that, we need to only focus on what the company believes we deliver value on versus what the customer or the student ultimately needs, to feel like they can really utilize your product and be loyal and successful with it.
Yes, well said. And I remember when we first talked to you about this and you said it could be something as simple as how do we coach them to set up a study room or a study space in their homes when perhaps they didn't really need that dedicated space in the past.
Right. Yeah. I think it's insights like that really, number one, humanize your brand in terms of helping you understand, what are some of the things that you may not even anticipate, things that aren't necessarily product features or flaws, but things that are in the ecosystem that make it hard for people to fully engage or fully utilize your products and services. And so that's where taking a bit of a broader sort of whole customer view of how we needed to really tackle the challenge of first year retention and what are the biggest hurdles, not just from a business perspective in terms of alignment of marketing and product and technology, but what are some of the sort of external factors that are at play in terms of, in our case, schedules and many other things that come into play when people are trying to focus not only on a full-time job and a family and other familial responsibilities, but also go back to school. And what sort of support structures do we need to think about? What sort of, motivational carrots and things can we also help supply?
I love that. And it's all around having great sources of data and then actually taking those insights and running some experiments to see, how you turn that into action. Michael, you've been working with some great industries over the last 20 plus years. I think last time I talked to you, you've worked with close to 200 organizations. What separates the data wonks from the people who might be resting on their laurels or, using old information to try to deepen their customer experience or deliver value?
Well, I think one thing is there's no one way to understand the customer, but I think the intent and the will to do what Amy's talking about, that whole view, realizing that the insights that you need may not necessarily involve the thing you're selling, but it might involve those things that surround the decision of what you're selling. Like Amy's saying, are you prepared? What are the things outside of the decision? They may silently agree they need your offering, but there may be some hurdles in their life. And I think that's where you need to, through data, through talking to customers, whatever means you can to really try to find understanding. And I think, there's a lot of talk about privacy and security, and that's really critical. But I also think that customers are willing to give up a level of privacy if it's with the intent of being more helpful, right? So I think you have to make a balance, but I think that you need to understand your customer at a deeper level than just walking them through the features and offers. And I think that's fantastic what you're doing, Amy. You're really understanding the people that you're wanting to reach, and that there's factors outside of the decision to sign up that are bigger than the actual offering itself. Yeah.
I agree. And Amy, I wish you were with us last week. We had our live stream and we showed the top 10 skills that are required for the workforce of 2025. And what you just modeled for everybody absolutely reflects that. And so I invite people who are watching to go back to my website to watch that replay as well. It's lisanirell.com/events to see what I'm describing, because all of you here watching this live stream, either live or the replay, need to really look at yourself as a marketer, as an entrepreneur, and say, how am I becoming a student to become one of the best members of the workforce of 2025? So we have a few more minutes together, Amy. Tell us, I always love the crystal ball question. If you look out 3 to 5 years about the convergence of customer experience, marketing, data, and retention, what do you see happening?
That's a great question. I think hopefully we see a lot more just alignment and less of this sense that this is my functional role. But I think the more we think about this and treat all of these as sort of a discipline that we need to be focused on, I think, I'll share a quick story. When I was at USA Today, which you mentioned, I led our customer experience and our data science teams, and we did this sort of 100 days analysis where we looked at things like the frequency of visits, the type of content, the channels, and we learned very quickly from a data perspective that not all engagement is created. There were certain things like newsletters that made us more effective in terms of driving frequency of visit and depth of engagement. But what we really then did was work very, very closely in total partnership with marketing and product and technology to align on a much broader consumer engagement strategy that looked at, content strategy and optimization. So what is the content that is stickiest in terms of driving retention? What channel performance and features do we need to focus on? How do we get really clear about that value prop up front in marketing? And so to me, things like CX, things like data science really can be, I think, the galvanizing force that tries to align people. And we talked about even the role of corporate strategy or strategy in general, divisional strategy, B2C strategy, whatever level you want to ladder that up to. But how do you use those as tools in the toolbox to really upfront align on these are the key things and the key priorities that we need to focus on? How do we make sure that we don't have discrete functional roadmaps and priorities, but that we're thinking about it, again, going back to the customer in terms of overall consumer strategy and what does that look like for the business and the customer? And if you do that in partnership with your teams across the aisle, you're just going to be that much more agile and effective.
I love that. And Michael, before we do wrap up, we'll do a little recap here in a minute. I also want to throw another resource out to the community that I think will really illustrate this. If you're not following Martin Lindstrom, who is based in Switzerland, Martin has written 6 books on culture, branding, and getting closer to the customer. He really walks the walk and talks the talk, right? He went and lived with 3,000 customers on behalf of one of his own clients. And he wanted to watch and observe how they lived their lives, what gave them joy, what upset them. And you talk about being of value to his clients. He had some very good data to come back and share with them. So, there are multiple methods you can do to get closer to your audience and to your customers. Amy, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today for this global live stream with help and support from the LinkedIn Learning community. You are really an avatar for all things customer loyalty related. And I have definitely learned so much from you over the years. So we can't wait to have you back and have Lori join us as well from time. Lori couldn't be here today. She had a personal matter come up, but she will be back. So Amy, people know how to find you now on LinkedIn, and any closing thoughts before you depart?
Well, no, I just thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful session. I think the more we keep the conversation going, and the more that we challenge ourselves to think, on the part of the customer, that is, we're all going to win. And you mentioned that, I think the biggest thing that I try to stress is industry competition is not your business competition. It really is, to your point, the bar is raised for everybody. So we need to all be in this together. We need to advocate for the customer. We are customers ourselves. So thank you for creating the space for us to have this conversation today.
It was a delight to see you, Amy.
Enjoyed
Thanks
it.
again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Oh, Michael, we covered a lot of ground today in a very short time, and I'd love your thoughts on a big takeaway that you're grabbing from today's conversation with Amy.
I'm just, this whole conversation just shows me how much selling and marketing needs to change, from blasting messaging to thinking more intimately about the whole person, the customer, and how do we understand them better. We're not blasting messaging. We're engineering value and experiences through deeper understanding. And so how do we use data? How do we use whatever means to become more intimate so that we're not in that old traditional mode of what kind of messages do we need to blast to everybody today? Messaging is critical, but it's all wrapped around that relationship, that level of intimacy, so that value is real and it's sincere and it says, you know me, right? People are going to want to know that you know them, right, as in the relationship. So I think that's maybe not a takeaway, but it spurred some thinking on that, how we need to shift.
I think the greatest takeaway for me was that she punctuated the importance of empathy in every interaction we have with our prospects, our audience, and our customers. It gets a lot of lip service, but I love organizations like Strategic Education that are demonstrating it for other industries. And I also want to give credit to Ford. I don't even drive a Ford, but I have started to give it a second look just because the sheer focus they had on listening to customers and staying a few steps ahead of customers to discover unmet needs, right? It's something we all aspire to do. So, and it's not about just reading the data, it's about feeling where your customer is right now and what their life is really like. And that's powerful.
It's understanding the things that they know they need. And then if you're really doing a great job with it, you're actually anticipating some very useful and meaningful things that they haven't even thought of, right? That Jedi level that this truck is representing.
It very much is. Hey, Michael, I know you've been with us a few times here on the live streams. Thanks for taking time out from your trip to Nevada to be with us today. And we'll catch up with you again next time here on the Mindful Marketer live stream. So see you next time.
All right. My pleasure. I enjoyed it. See you guys. See you.
Well, my friends, the bewitching hour has arrived, and I want to thank all of you who stayed with us to meet these two great avatars of being advocates for the customer. You know, I'm passionate about this. I hope you got some great examples and some new resources. And if you are a marketing leader, you can always contact me if you're looking for ways to connect with other like-minded marketing leaders to grow professionally, get promoted faster, be more innovative, and get closer to your customer to drive mindful growth. So get in touch with me if I can answer some questions and tell you about our wonderful community. So in the meantime, thank you again to LinkedIn Learning. You can download my course anytime. We have now over 11,000 of you who have taken the My Effective CMO course, and I want to thank you for that. I also want to let you know that we're taking a little time off and coming back on July 9th. Steph, I hope I got the date right. We're going to be back here with a person who understands the world of CEOs very well. Jim Schlexer not only has been a CEO, he is a very seasoned board member and wrote a seminal book called Great CEOs Are Lazy. How is that for a name? Great CEOs Are Lazy. So be back with us in July. If you're someone who wants to work more effectively with your CEO and you want to know what CEOs are thinking about right now, don't miss that live stream. Again, I wish you all a very safe, mindful, and outdoor weekend ahead. Sending you off from Virginia in the USA. Bye-bye.